Shalom, friends. These are difficult days for Americans and for lovers of freedom everywhere, watching the collapse of the government of Afghanistan into the hands of the Taliban, a ruthless terrorist group of radical fundamentalists. We feel pain for the refugees, fear for what's coming to a beautiful country and to its people, and worries about freedom in that area of the world and violence. But I have some thoughts that I want to root in Jewish tradition and to offer based on biblical values and insights that might help guide us in this difficult time. The first is I want to notice that the United States has been fighting in Afghanistan for over 20 years in a bipartisan effort launched by President Bush, advanced by President Obama and by President Trump. President Biden is the first to not only say we need to end it, but to then end American involvement. And the first goal of our presence in Afghanistan was not primarily nation building or humanitarianism. It was to make sure that Afghanistan didn't become a continuing launching pad for the kinds of attacks that happened at 9/11. And so the work was really anti-terror work, aiming at Al-Qaeda, aiming at others. But over the years, it morphed, it grew into something bigger as it was clear that to really prevent Afghanistan from being a haven of terror, that there had to be a way of assaulting against terrorists, against Al-Qaeda, against the Taliban, against their allies, and try to strengthen and build a democratic Afghanistan. For 20 years, those efforts have been made, and here I want to fall on a word of the prophet Zechariah. The prophet says, "V'ha'emet v'ha'shalom ehavu," you should love truth and peace. Sometimes our love for peace can blind us to the truth, and in this case, our determination to try to create a democratic, peaceful Afghanistan flew in the face of truth, which is, first of all, that the Taliban is a ruthless organization that will continue to terrorize its own people into submission, and second, that the government of Afghanistan, despite enormous resources provided by the United States and lengthy training, wasn't able to mobilize a sufficiently engaged army to be able to hold the Taliban back. We started to withdraw, and Taliban started to take over. That happened quickly. But loving truth and peace means recognizing that sometimes the truth is we're not going to get the kind of peace we optimally desired. And then we have to fall back on what the truth makes possible. And in this case, at some point there has to be a decision that nothing is going to alter the outcome. We could continue to put Americans at risk. We could continue to attempt to police a distant country that doesn't seem willing to police itself. And we could do so by exposing innocent Americans, military and civilian, to harm. The president decided not to do that and decided to say that their first obligation of the United States government is to protect Americans. And so with great regret began the work of withdrawing our numbers. And this has been going on for some time. That creates an agenda for us now. And that agenda has to be, first of all, to find haven for refugees, to make sure that people who are fleeing the viciousness and the fundamentalism of Taliban have safe havens and places to go where they can be safe and where they can live their lives. Two, we have to affirmatively work to protect women, thought leaders, other victims of Taliban, and to be able to continue to shine a light of transparency on their continuing crimes and assaults against their own people and against the free exchange of ideas and beliefs. We need to work, fourth, to be mindful of a worldwide terror network. Taliban doesn't operate alone. They operate with a host of other organizations, Al-Qaeda before them, Hamas, Hezbollah, nations that are involved Iran, Syria, others, in supporting and fomenting this kind of brutal violence as a way of advancing their own criminal agendas. And we need to remain resilient and strong. Loving peace, in this case, requires us to stand strong as well against the network of terror and to realize that they threaten freedom everywhere. In the United States, in Israel, in Europe, around the world, wherever democracy and the free exchange of ideas and freedom to believe or not believe is available to people, that is the enemy of the Taliban. That is the enemy of Hamas and Hezbollah, and we have to rise up against the people they terrorize on their behalf. So my blessing for all of us is that in these difficult times we continue to talk, we continue to gather data, we continue to recognize the limits of what we are able to do, and at the same time we're able to recognize the extent of what we can do. We can continue to support efforts for freedom and democracy around the world. We can continue to stand tall against terror, and we continue to honor and salute the brave people in the armed services who were willing for 20 years to shoulder this burden because the goal of a peaceful Afghanistan seemed worth it. It still is, and we'll have to advance that in other ways. Shalom.